There are 6 sentences you have probably said before, not curses, not insults, ordinary sentences, the kind you whisper in dua after a hard day, or mutter under your breath when nothing is going right, or say about someone else while thinking you're being sincere. And according to the Qur'an and the authentic words of the Prophet, some of these sentences are dangerous enough that entire chapters of hadith literature exist just to warn believers away from them. Not because Allah is looking for a reason to punish you, because these 6 things quietly poison the very relationship they came from, the relationship they were supposed to protect. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what these 6 things are. You'll know why the Prophet told his companions, directly and without hesitation, to never say some of these words again. You'll know the exact replacement the Sunnah gives us instead, and you'll understand why a dua can feel unanswered, why a heart can feel far from Allah even while the body keeps praying, why peace can keep slipping through your fingers no matter how much you try to hold on to it, not because Allah stopped listening, but because of how you've been speaking to Him and about Him without ever realizing it. This isn't a trip. This is mirror. Watch until the end, because the 6th one is the one almost nobody talks about, and it might be the most dangerous of all 6. Why 6 sentences carry so much weight. Here's why this matters more than it sounds like it should. In Islam, the tongue is never treated as a minor organ, an afterthought compared to the real sins. The Prophet said that a person may speak a single sentence without giving it much thought, and because of it fall further than the distance between the East and the West. Words are not neutral in this deen. They carry weight in front of Allah, whether you meant them lightly or not. And the words we use about Allah, and to Allah, carry the heaviest weight of all, because they don't just describe a feeling in the moment. They reveal what we actually believe about Him, underneath the surface, in the moments nobody else is watching, and nobody is checking our theology. Your dua can lose its strength because of how you word it. Your heart can grow heavy with a despair that feels like exhaustion, but is really something deeper. Your barakah, that quiet blessing that makes a small income feel like enough, or a hard year still feel bearable, or a difficult person still feel worth loving, can thin out. Not because Allah withdrew it from you, because your own words, repeated enough times, opened a door that should have stayed closed the whole time. None of what follows is invented, and none of it is a cultural saying dressed up as religion. Every single point here is rooted directly in the Qur'an, or in hadith recorded in Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, or other reliable collections, and referenced with the sources named clearly so you can look them up yourself. These are things the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, explicitly and specifically warned his companions never to say, not vague spiritual advice, but direct instruction. Meet Yusuf. To make all of this real instead of abstract, imagine a man named Yusuf. Yusuf is not a scholar, and he's not particularly sinful either. He's an ordinary young man, the kind most of us know, the kind most of us are. He prays, on time. He tries to be good to his parents and patient with his kids. He genuinely to please Allah. But like almost all of us, he's still learning how to actually talk to Him. Not just recite words, but mean them correctly, direct them correctly, and understand what they're really doing to his own heart. Over the course of one difficult month, Yusuf is going to say every single one of these 6 things without realizing what he's doing. Watch closely, because by the end, he's going to learn what to say instead, and you might notice that you already know this man. You might notice that, in one way or another, you've already been him. 1. Forgive me, if you wish. Here's the first one, and it might genuinely surprise you because on the surface it sounds humble. It sounds like exactly the kind of thing a sincere, God-conscious person would say. Yusuf lost his job 3 weeks ago. Not fired for wrongdoing, the company restructured, his role simply disappeared, and there was nothing personal about it, which somehow made it feel worse. That night, after his wife and children were asleep, he sat on the edge of his bed in the dark and made dua the way he always had, the way he'd been making dua his whole life. Ya Allah, forgive my sins, if you wish. Ya Allah, make this easy for me, if you wish. Ya Allah, open a door for me somewhere, if you wish. It felt respectful to him, even reverent. Who was he, a struggling and imperfect servant, to demand anything from the Lord of the worlds? Attaching, if you wish, to every request felt like the polite, humble, appropriately small way for a person like him to ask, But this is exactly the sentence the Prophet told us, in plain and direct language, never to use. He said, "When one of you supplicates, let him not say, 'O Allah, forgive me if you wish. O Allah, have mercy on me if you wish,' but let him ask with resolve, for none can compel Allah." This is recorded in both Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. It is not a minor or disputed opinion tucked away in an obscure book. It is one of the most agreed-upon etiquettes of dua in the entire Sunnah, taught by more than one companion, repeated across multiple authentic chains. So, would something that sounds this humble actually be discouraged so clearly? Because humility and hesitation are not the same thing, even though they can feel identical from the inside. Humility bows the heart low before Allah while still believing He is capable of anything. Hesitation doubts the outcome before the request has even left your mouth. When you say, "if you wish," you are not actually glorifying Allah's power, because nobody was questioning His power to begin with. What you are quietly doing is preparing yourself for rejection in advance. You are protecting your own heart from disappointment by never fully committing to the request, so that if the answer doesn't come, some small part of you can say, "Well, I did say if you wish." Nobody was ever suggesting that a servant could force Allah's hand. That was never in question, and the hadith says so directly, "None can compel Allah." The instruction to ask with resolve isn't about applying pressure to the divine. It's about training your own heart to actually believe He is capable, generous, and near, rather than distant and reluctant. A parent doesn't love a child any less for asking boldly for something they need. If anything, the boldness reflects the trust the child has in that parent. Allah, who describes Himself in the Qur'an as closer to us than our own jugular vein, is infinitely more generous than any human parent, and He loves to be asked as though the servant genuinely expects to be answered. Think about how differently Yusuf's night could have gone with a single change of wording. Instead of "forgive me if you wish," simply, "Ya Allah, forgive me." Instead of "make this easy if you wish," simply, "Allah, make this easy for me." No hedge, no in exit. Just a servant standing, or in Yusuf's case, sitting alone in the dark, asking his Lord directly, the way the Sunnah actually teaches us to. Humility bows the head. Doubt, the hands. 2. If only I had. The second one crept into Yusuf's mind almost every single night that month, usually right as he was trying to fall asleep, which is exactly when thoughts like this do their worst damage. If only I had taken that other job offered 2 years ago. If only I had spoken up in the meeting before the layoffs were decided. If only I had saved more money back when things were stable and easy. The thoughts looped, each one sharper and more detailed than the last, until Yusuf wasn't really sleeping anymore. He was replaying a version of his life that never actually happened, over and over, as though enough imagined regret could somehow reach backward and rewrite the past. This exact spiral has a name in the Sunnah, and the Prophet addressed it head-on, not vaguely but with a specific instruction and a specific replacement phrase. He said, "Be eager for what benefits you, seek help from Allah, and do not become weak. And if something befalls you, if only I had done such, then such and such would have happened. But say instead, Allah He willed, He did, for indeed the word if opens the door to the work of shaitan." This is recorded in Sahih Muslim, and it stands as one of the clearest, most direct instructions anywhere in the hadith literature about how a believer should handle regret. Notice carefully what this hadith does not say. It doesn't say never reflect on a mistake. It doesn't say never learn from a decision that turned out badly. In fact, the same hadith opens by telling us to be eager for what benefits you, meaning effort, planning, and learning from experience are all encouraged, even required. Reflection has a purpose. It teaches you something useful for next time, and then it lets you move forward carrying that lesson. Regret spirals have no such purpose. They don't change anything that already happened. They can't, because the decree has already passed. They simply keep a person trapped in a version of events that no longer exists anywhere except in their own mind, reliving pain that already occurred once, as though suffering through it a second and third and 40th time could somehow undo it the first time. This is exactly the door the hadith is describing when it mentions shaitan. He doesn't need a person to stop believing in Allah in order to defeat them spiritually. He simply needs them stuck, replaying the same regret on a loop until it stops being ordinary sadness and curdles into something worse. Quiet resentment toward their own decree, or worse still, a buried resentment toward the one who decreed it in the first place. If only rarely stays innocent for long. Underneath it, if you listen closely to your own heart the next time you say it, there is usually an unspoken complaint hiding just beneath the surface. This shouldn't have happened to me. I deserved better than this. The replacement the Prophet gave us is only a handful of words, but it carries an entire theology folded inside it. Allah has decreed, and what He willed, He did. This is not a phrase that dismisses your effort. Remember, the same hadith told you to be eager and to seek Allah's help beforehand. It's a phrase for after the outcome has already happened, when the door marked past has already closed for good, and the only door still open to you is the one marked now, with Allah's decree already in your hand, whether you like its shape or not. Yusuf eventually noticed the pattern in his own mind, not because someone corrected him, but because he caught himself mid-sentence one night, halfway through another, if only I had, and simply stopped. He said the words instead, Qadara Allahu wa ma sha'a fa'al. He didn't feel better. But something in the loop broke, just slightly, for the first time in weeks. Look, to learn. Don't, to drown. 3. This whole year has been cursed. By the third week, Yusuf was exhausted in a way that sleep no longer seemed able to fix. Bills were coming due faster than interviews were coming in. His wife was trying hard to stay positive around him, and he could see, even through his own fog, that maintaining that positivity was costing her something too. One evening, stuck in traffic on the way home from another interview that clearly wasn't going to lead anywhere, he muttered under his breath, almost without thinking about it, "This year is cursed. Everything about my life right now is just cursed." He didn't mean it as theology. He meant it the way most people mean it when they say something like this, as a release valve for frustration, a way of venting pressure that had nowhere else to go. But this is precisely the sentence Allah Himself addressed directly, in one of the rare hadith where Allah speaks in the first person about His own creation being insulted. The Prophet reported that Allah said, "The son of Adam curses time, dar, while I am time, in my hand is the night and the day." This hadith Qudsi is recorded in both Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, and it's considered one of the most striking of all the divine sayings preserved in the Sunnah. Think carefully about what's actually happening when a person curses this day or this year or their whole cursed life. Time itself is not an agent. It doesn't choose what happens inside it. It doesn't decide who gets laid off, who gets sick, who gets the phone call they were dreading. Every single event that unfolds within a day or a year was decreed by Allah, not by the calendar that simply marks when it happened. So when a curse gets aimed at this cursed day, it doesn't actually land on the day. It lands, whether the speaker realizes it or not, on the one who decreed everything that occurred during it. This is genuinely different from expressing pain, and the Qur'an gives us a clear model for the difference. The Prophet Yaqub, upon him be peace, lost his beloved son and grieved so deeply and for so long that he eventually went blind from weeping. And yet what did he say? "I only complain of my suffering and my grief to Allah." Surah Yusuf 26. He didn't curse his circumstances. He didn't call his years cursed or his life ruined. He brought his pain directly to Allah, like a servant bringing an unbearable burden to the only one actually capable of lifting it. That is the real difference between a complaint and a curse. One is dua, directed upward in trust toward the one who can change things. The other is a swipe sideways at the decree itself, directed at nothing and no one in particular, which is exactly why it lands where it was never meant to. None of this means you have to suppress how hard things actually are. You are allowed to be exhausted. You are allowed to say, honestly and without flinching, "This has genuinely been one of the hardest years of my life," and mean every single word of it. What the Sunnah is asking you to drop is not honesty about your pain. It's the specific habit of cursing the container instead of turning, with that same pain, toward the one who filled it and who alone can empty it. Complain to Allah. Never curse what Allah created. You might think the hardest ones are already behind us. What comes next doesn't just touch your daily peace of mind the way the first 3 did. It reaches down into your relationship with Allah's mercy itself. And the 4th one might be the sentence you've said, quietly, more times than any of the others. 4. Allah will never forgive someone like me. By the 4th week, something in Yusuf had quietly given up. in a way that was almost invisible from the outside. He'd missed 2 Fajr prayers in a row, buried under an exhaustion and low mood he didn't have a real name for. He'd snapped at his wife over something small that wasn't really about her at all. Lying awake one night, staring at the ceiling, a thought settled into him that felt less like a passing feeling and more like a final verdict already handed down. Someone like me, this inconsistent, this weak, this far from who I'm supposed to be, Allah has probably already decided I'm not worth another chance. He didn't say it out to anyone. And belief is exactly where this particular sentence does its real damage, not when it's spoken aloud, but when it quietly settles into how a person understands their own worth in front of Allah. Allah addresses this exact thought directly, in language that leaves absolutely no room for ambiguity. In Surah Az-Zumar he says, "Say, O my servants who have transgressed against themselves, do not despair of the mercy of Allah. Indeed, forgives all sins. Indeed, it is He who is the forgiving, the merciful." Qur'an 39:53. Look carefully at who this verse is addressed to. Not the righteous. Not the people who have their prayers together and their sins under control. It's addressed specifically to those who have transgressed against themselves, people who have genuinely sinned, genuinely failed, genuinely let themselves and their own standards down more than once, possibly for years. And the very first instruction given to them, before anything else, is, do not despair. Here is the distinction that Yusuf's exhausted heart had quietly blurred together without realizing it. Guilt over a sin and despair of Allah's mercy are not the same thing at all, and one of them is actually good for you, while the other is corrosive. Guilt is a compass. It tells you something in your life is off course, and if you let it, it points your feet back toward Allah, back toward the prayer mat, back toward repentance. Despair is a wall. It tells you the door has already closed for good, so trying to walk toward it again is pointless. Shaitan does not need you to stop believing in Allah's existence in order to defeat you spiritually. He only needs you to believe the door is shut. A person who has convinced themselves, I'm too far gone at this point, quietly stops making dua, quietly stops trying to fix their prayer, quietly stops reaching for anything better. And that stillness, that quiet giving up, is precisely what despair was designed to produce in the first place. Feeling genuinely bad about a missed prayer should move your feet closer to the prayer mat, not further away from it. If a sin has convinced you that you're not even worthy of asking for forgiveness anymore, that specific feeling is worth questioning honestly, because Allah, who already knows every single sin you have ever committed far better than you remember them yourself, is the one telling you directly in His own words, not to despair. Not a friend offering comfort. Not a motivational reminder written to make you feel better for 5 minutes. Allah speaking plainly, addressing exactly the kind of servant Yusuf believed himself to have become. Guilt brings you closer. Despair pushes you away. 5. I swear, it's going to be fine. Financial pressure has a strange way of making people reach for a certainty they don't actually possess. One evening, sitting across from him at the kitchen table with the bills spread out between them, Yusuf's wife asked him quietly, "Are we actually going to be okay?" And instead of saying the honest thing, "I don't know for certain, but I'm trying everything I can, and I trust Allah with what I can't control," he said, "I swear on my father's life, it's going to be fine. I swear on our kids, everything is going to work out." He meant it purely as reassurance, a way to give her something solid to hold on to in a moment that felt anything but solid. What he didn't realize is that he'd just done something the Prophet specifically and repeatedly warned believers against: swearing an oath by something other than Allah. The Prophet said, in words that are about as plain and direct as language gets, "Whoever swears, let him swear by Allah or else remain silent." This is recorded in both Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. In another authentic narration, collected by Abu Dawud and at-Tirmidhi, he said that swearing an oath by anything other than Allah is a serious matter, one that should never be allowed to become a casual verbal habit. Scholars differ somewhat on exactly how to categorize the severity of this act, but they are unanimous on the underlying principle. An oath is not a small or throwaway thing in this religion, and only Allah is worthy of carrying that particular weight. There's something worth noticing underneath Yusuf's habit here, and it isn't really about the specific phrase, "I swear on my father's life." It's about what he was actually trying to do in that moment. manufacture a certainty about a future he genuinely could not control, using the most emotionally forceful language available to him, because plain, ordinary trust in a didn't feel reassuring enough to say out loud in front of someone he loved and didn't want to disappoint. That's the real issue underneath the surface. Swearing by something other than Allah subtly elevates that thing, a parent's life, a child's life, a cherished possession, to a status that has only ever belonged to Allah, the status of a guarantee. And no created thing, however precious, can actually guarantee an outcome. Only the one who decrees outcomes in the first place has that authority. None of this means a person can never make a promise or offer honest reassurance to someone they love who is scared. It means the weight of certainty belongs with Allah, and only with Allah, not with an oath sworn on a loved one's life just to make ordinary words sound heavier and more convincing than they actually are. Inshallah, we are going to get through this carries more real, honest strength than any oath sworn on someone's life ever could, because it places the outcome exactly where it has always belonged, instead of pretending Yusuf himself had any authority to promise it. Only Allah deserves of an oath. 6. Allah is not going to forgive someone like him. This is the one almost nobody expects going into a video like this, and it's the one that changed everything for Yusuf by the end of that month. An old friend of his, someone he'd grown up with since childhood, prayed beside in the same masjid as a teenager, had drifted far from the deen over the years. Drinking regularly now, distant from family, living the kind of lifestyle Yusuf had quietly judged from a careful, comfortable distance for a long time without ever saying so directly. One night, venting to another mutual friend about his own brutal month, the conversation naturally drifted toward this old friend, and Yusuf said, almost without thinking about the weight of it, "Honestly, at this point I don't think Allah is even going to forgive someone like him anymore." It felt in the moment it left his mouth, like religious concern, like seriousness about the deen. It was neither. There is a hadith recorded in Sahih Muslim that describes almost exactly this scene, word for word in its essential shape. The Prophet told his companions about two men, one devoted entirely to worship, spending his days and nights in prayer and remembrance, and the other repeatedly caught in sin, falling again and again into the same mistakes. Every time the second man sinned, the worshipper would rebuke him harshly. One day the worshipper found him in sin yet again and finally said, "By Allah, Allah will never forgive you." At that exact moment, Allah himself responded directly, addressing the worshipper. "Who is it that swears an oath about me, that I will not forgive so-and-so? I have already forgiven him, and I have nullified your deeds." A single sentence spoken carelessly about someone else's soul erased what appeared from the outside to be an entire lifetime of that man's worship. Read that again, slowly, because it deserves to actually land rather than just pass by as a dramatic story. It wasn't the sinning man who lost everything by the end of that hadith. It was the one who seemed righteous, the one who had genuinely spent years in devoted worship, who lost his deeds in a single moment over a single sentence. Not because he sinned in the ordinary sense that word usually means, because he spoke about the boundaries of Allah's mercy as though those boundaries were his to define, and someone else's forgiveness his to deny on Allah's behalf. That is a claim only Allah has the right to make about anyone, ever, and reaching for it, even with what feels like sincere concern, even wrapped in the language of religious seriousness, is a form of arrogance quietly dressed up as piety. This is the deepest of all 6, because it is by far the easiest one to miss inside yourself while you're actually saying it. The first 5 mistakes in this video are mostly private, whispered in dua, muttered in traffic, replayed alone at night, said quietly to comfort a spouse. This 6th one is said out loud about someone else, often while the speaker feels most righteous for saying it, most certain they're on the right side of the conversation. And that's exactly what makes it so dangerous. It is arrogance that feels, from the inside, indistinguishable from religious concern. You are allowed to be genuinely worried about someone you love who has drifted. You are allowed to hate what they're doing without hating who they are. You are allowed to make sincere dua for their guidance, and to gently advise them if you're in a real position in their life to do so. What nobody has the authority to do, not Yusuf, not the worshipper in the hadith, not anyone reading this right now, is to announce on Allah's behalf that his mercy has a specific limit, and that a specific person you know has already crossed it for good. Yusuf sat with that hadith for a long time after his friend first told it to him. He thought about his old friend, still drifting somewhere out there. He thought about his own month, the missed prayers, the whispered despair, the careless oath at the kitchen table. And for the first time in weeks, he realized how much of what he'd been saying in every direction to Allah and about other people had quietly been about trying to control things that were never his to control in the first place. You don't have the authority to close a door Allah left open. A simple framework before you speak. Here's something practical you can actually carry with you, not just remember for 5 minutes after this video ends and then forget by tomorrow morning. Before your next dua, before your next hard day, before your next comment about someone else's sins, slow down and run through these 6 questions honestly. Am I asking Allah with real certainty, or am I quietly hedging with, if you wish, to protect myself from disappointment? Am I replaying, if only on a loop, or have I actually accepted what's already been decreed and moved forward? Am I complaining to Allah, bringing him my pain the way Yaqub did, or am I cursing what Allah created out of frustration? Is this guilt pulling me back toward Allah, or has it already curdled into a despair that's pushing me further away? Am I reaching for an oath on something other than Allah just to manufacture a certainty I don't actually have? Am I speaking about someone else's forgiveness as though I were the one who actually gets to decide it? 6 questions. You don't need to have hadith references memorized to use them in real time. You just need enough awareness to catch the sentence a half second before it leaves your mouth, and to ask yourself honestly, which of these 6 it might actually be. What isn't saying? Before we go any further, let's clear up what none of this actually means, because it would be easy, after a video like this, to walk away afraid to speak at all, second-guessing every word, and that was never the point of any of it. This does not mean you have to sound falsely certain in dua, forcing yourself to feel no doubt at all before you're allowed to ask. Ask boldly even when your heart is genuinely heavy and unsure. The boldness lives in the act of asking, not in faking a feeling you don't have yet. This does not mean you can never reflect on a mistake, or say, I wish I had handled that differently, in an ordinary, non-spiraling way. Reflection that quietly leads to real change is wisdom, not the destructive, if only this video is actually warning against. This does not mean you can't grieve openly, or say honestly that a season of your life has been genuinely brutal. Yaqub's grief was allowed, was even praised. It was his complaint, aimed upward at Allah rather than sideways at his circumstances, that made it worship instead of despair. This does not mean guilt itself is something bad to feel. Guilt that moves you back toward Allah is one of his quiet mercies to you. This does not mean oaths are forbidden in this religion. It simply means their real weight belongs with Allah alone, and nowhere else. And this does not mean you have to stop caring about people who are struggling visibly with sin. It means that care gets expressed through sincere dua and gentle, patient effort, not through confident declarations about a mercy that was never yours to measure or hand out in the first place. The theme underneath all 6 of these is not watch your words constantly out of fear of getting it wrong. It's something gentler and, honestly, more freeing than that. Hand things back to the one who actually holds them and stop carrying weight that was never yours to carry. The real lesson underneath all 6. Here is what ties every single one of these 6 mistakes together, and it's worth genuinely sitting with for a moment instead of rushing past it. Every one of these 6 sentences is really the same underlying mistake, just wearing 6 different outfits, an attempt to hold on to a kind of control that was never actually yours to hold in the first place. If you wish, tries to control the outcome of a dua by softening the ask in advance, so the disappointment won't sting quite as much if the answer doesn't come. If only I had, tries to control the past by mentally rewriting a decree that has already closed for good, as though enough imagined effort could reach backward through time. Cursing time tries to assign blame to a convenient, faceless container, instead of trusting the one who actually filled it with everything that happened. Despairing of Allah's mercy tries to control your own worth by deciding, ahead of Allah himself, that you're already beyond saving. Swearing by something other than Allah tries to control an uncertain future by borrowing a weight and certainty that was never actually yours to lend out. And declaring someone else unforgivable tries to control the one thing that belongs to Allah and Allah alone in every single case, without a single exception, another human being's ultimate fate. Every single one of these 6, without exception, is tawakkul working in reverse. Grasping instead of releasing. Real tawakkul, real lived reliance on Allah, means releasing the outcome of your dua into His hands with genuine certainty that He is capable, even before you know what the answer will be. Releasing your past into His decree with real acceptance, not resignation, but trust. Releasing your pain into His care through honest complaint instead of bitter cursing, the way Jacob did through years of grief. Releasing your own soul into His mercy even on your absolute worst day, when you feel the least deserving of it. Releasing your future into His promise instead of into your own oath, sworn on things you can't actually guarantee. And releasing other people's souls entirely into His judgment, instead of quietly, subtly, trying to make that judgment yourself. This is what taqwa actually looks like in the small, daily texture of ordinary speech, not a long list of banned words to memorize and monitor, but a heart that has genuinely stopped trying to do Allah's job for Him, in ways it never even noticed it was doing. Real tawbah, real turning back toward Allah, often starts exactly here, in exactly this quiet and undramatic place, not with some large, obvious sin, but with a small, ordinary sentence you finally notice yourself saying, catch yourself in the middle of, and choose this time to say differently. 3 things actually do. Knowing all of this is genuinely not enough on its own, and it never has been. Here are 3 specific, concrete actions to take, starting tonight, not someday. Tonight, make one dua without a single, if you wish, attached anywhere inside it. Ask for something real and specific, ask with genuine resolve, and mean it fully as you say it, even if your heart still feels nervous or unsure the entire time you're saying it. The certainty in the words can come before the certainty in the feeling. The very next time a sentence starts forming in your mind that begins with, if only I had, catch it mid-thought and replace it deliberately with the words the Prophet himself taught us to say, Qadara al-Allahu wa ma sha'a fa'al. Allah has decreed, and whatever He willed, He has done. Say the words even before you feel them settle in your heart. In this case, the feeling has a way of following the words more often than most people expect. Think, right now, of one specific person you've quietly written off in your own heart. Someone you've silently judged as too far gone, too sinful, too distant from the deen for Allah to still reach them. Tonight, instead of adding another silent judgment to the pile, make one sincere, specific dua for their guidance. Let that dua be the new sentence you say about them from now on, replacing the old one. A word, you go. If you recognized yourself somewhere in these 6, or, if you're being honest with yourself right now, in more than just one of them, you were probably not watching this video by accident. Maybe this is the moment to pause before your next dua, and ask Allah with more certainty than you've had in a long time. Maybe this is the moment to finally set down an if only you've been quietly carrying for years without realizing how heavy it had become. Maybe this is the moment to stop believing the quiet lie that you're too far gone for a Lord who says, in His own direct words to you and to every servant who has ever transgressed against themselves, do not despair. Allah is not waiting somewhere for you to become perfect before He starts listening to you. He is simply waiting for you to actually ask, honestly, and with certainty this time. If something in this reached you, comment Ameen below if you're asking Allah tonight for a heart that speaks to Him with more certainty and speaks about others with more mercy. If you know someone quietly carrying an if only, or someone who's already decided somewhere inside that Allah is done giving them chances, send them this video, not to correct them, not to lecture them, but simply because someone once needed to hear exactly this, and it might as well be you who finally sends it to them. And if reminders like this one, grounded honestly in the Qur'an and authentic Sunnah, are something you want more of, consider subscribing, not for the sake of a number on a screen, but because there is more of this still worth saying, and more of it worth hearing. May Allah soften how we speak to Him and how we speak about each other. Ameen.